Hi, and welcome to Saving Ophelia. My name's Thijs and this is Ophelia, and the slight mess I've made of her saloon. This time I'm ripping out the last of the lockers in Ophelia's saloon, the one in the forward port corner. I was preparing to do that when the pitlock incident happened, so that was kind of put on hold while I was working to get Ophelia's engine controls working reliably. Otherwise I couldn't really move Ophelia around as I might need in order to get the hole patched up. Before I could get any work done though, I needed to get rid of the previously created mess, as things had been left. Moving from one end of Ophelia to the other was quite an undertaking, with a slight risk of inflicting bodily harm onto oneself. Fortunately, I had once more been able to borrow a trailer from my fantastic neighbors. This makes moving scrap like this around so much easier. Once I have the scrap out of the boat and onto the hearth, that is. However much I don't like cleaning up messes, like the one I created in the saloon, doing so at the harbour somehow makes it much less bothersome. While I can't see much of what's going on around me when I'm below decks, it really is lovely when I poke my head up and get to enjoy the atmosphere, the weather and little things. Like this. Enjoying the weather and the scenery unfortunately won't help me get Ophelia ready, and neither will just using my bare hands. So I picked up my tools from the car. I made sure that I had batteries in the electrical tools I intended to use and then went back to the boat. So, finally ready, I set about actually removing the cupboard, and for some reason the mirror door seemed like a perfectly reasonable place to start. For once the screws came out fairly easy, although I almost made the mistake of removing all the ones in the upper hinge first, even though I really should know better. With the door out of the way, I decided to get rid of the shelves in the back of the cupboard, as they would likely get in the way otherwise. I didn't think they were strong enough to stay put once the aft side of the cupboard was removed. I was wrong though, those shelves were tough. Except for the front, which must have been a later addition. Instead of continuing a losing fight with the shelves, yeah, I was defeated by 3 pieces of plywood and 9 wooden blocks, I decided to remove the protective steel shield behind the wood stove, and fortunately for my ego, that one came out fairly easily. Continuing the theme of avoiding the main task, I've removed the old clock and barometer. Although they aren't anything special, I thought that it would be a shame to just wreck them, so I took them down gently. Even so, they will need quite a bit of polishing if they are to be used again. Just look at the amount of copper oxide on that clock. For some reason, both were hung with only 2 screws, even though they had easily accessible holes for 3. Someone probably got lazy. Unable to find any more tasks which would allow me to avoid attacking the cupboard itself, a task which for some reason in my mind suddenly had grown and now seemed like a very big task, I finally got down to actually doing what I'd set out to do. As per usual, I tried to get out the screws and simply disassemble the cupboard so that I might be able to reuse the wood. For instance, I'm clearly going to need something to cover the old water tank. I recently put my foot through it right next to the existing hole. For once though, taking things apart by reversing how it was put together actually worked. Well, to a degree at least. With only minimal application of violence to break the varnish, I managed to get out the front of the cupboard in one piece. I tried loosening more screws and also the bolts I thought kept the aft-facing panel fixed to the rest. But the screws wouldn't budge and the bolts just rotated without loosening. This wasn't exactly unexpected though, so I quickly went another route. Using the multi-cutter, I cut a slot next to the steel bar inside the cupboard, just wide enough after a bit of reworking to fit the blade of the reciprocating saw. Please note that I actually remembered the hearing protection this time. I do think that I deserve a pat on the back for that. From there, I just let the big saw do its thing. First a vertical cut, finished with a bit of help from the multi-cutter, and then a horizontal cut at the top. I couldn't cut quite to the edge with the big saw, so once more I used the multi-cutter to finish the job. And I then followed up with a bit of a persuasive percussion. Now, speaking of persuasion, much to my annoyance I can't seem to find the yellow persuader that I usually use. But one of the things I've inherited along with my dad's workshop was my grandfather's crowbar, which it turns out is just as effective as the one I bought myself. The big panel came loose easily enough, but at some point the cupboard had received a foam rubber-like cladding which stubbornly fought me all the way. A box cutter would probably have made short work of this very stretchy foam material, but the multi-cutter was also able to handle it, with a bit of difficulty though. Please note that the shelves were still hanging on after I removed the aft-facing panel. As I said, they were tougher than I thought they were. But without the panel, they were fairly easy to remove. With the cupboard thus gently deconstructed, I started digging into the elastic foam covering the back of the inside of the cupboard. It really was surprisingly elastic and yet tough, but fortunately the glue that had been used to adhere it often had a tendency to either let go or to take the paint it had been put on with it. Often isn't the same as always though, but I did manage to dig my way down to the plywood panels below. So that was it for this cupboard. It's now gone, well, mostly gone. And to no one's surprise really, I found the exact same thing inside this cupboard as I did in this one over here. A steel bar running from the deck and all the way down. What was a bit of a surprise though is that there doesn't seem to be a steel box below it. Oh, there's someone passing fast out there. At any rate, you can see down here, there isn't a box. Not like we have over here. And that's a bit odd. But, yeah, it did confuse me a bit, well, it does confuse me a bit, because I'm pretty sure that the reason we have these steel bars in here is because I have the main mast up here. And they're supposed to take the forces from the mast and carry them through the deck and down to the hull. And that makes sense, but then that would mean that the steel box over here behind this mess is intended to distribute those forces, and if I don't have a similar box down here, well, that is a bit odd. But I do expect to find some steel bars in here as well, so I don't think this bulkhead is quite as massive as it seems. I thought that that was the thing carrying the forces from the mast, but it probably doesn't. I won't know for sure anytime soon because I'm slightly hesitant to take this bulkhead down before I have the boat out of the water. I wouldn't want it to, well, collapse on itself. I don't think it will, but you never know. But yeah, so it's a bit odd, but as I said, I think the purpose of this piece of steel has been revealed. Now I just need to get rid of the paneling in here and the insulation. But I expect to find the exact same thing in this port side as I did the starboard side. Namely, well, paint, steel, and not a whole lot of rust, because that seems to be a problem for down here that stops. So I don't expect that. I also need to get rid of this really. This paneling needs to go as well, but I'm not exactly in a hurry to do that because I don't find anything, well, I don't see anything troubling in here. I don't know what I'm going to find behind it, but there's no indication that that's going to be a problem. And I really don't expect one over here either. The only thing that does make me a bit, well, hesitant is all this black stuff, because there's definitely been moisture back here. See in the ceiling as well. That's not a surprise, though. I could see that before I started ripping out the cupboard. But I guess that's why everything wooden has to go, other than the fact that I want to be able to see the hull. For now, though, I think I'd better get compiling this video, because it's going to take a while. And, well, you've seen me rip out this paneling and the insulation a million times. It's not exactly going to be any more interesting this time around. So thank you for tagging along so far. Please click the like and subscribe button if you don't mind. And, well, have a good one until next week. See ya.